subscribe and, you know, like the video. With South Africa did not have the same level of interconnectedness with centers of capital in the way that Israel has, right? Because South Africa was not able to maintain its apartheid, and Israel has been able to maintain its apartheid in the aftermath of the dissolution of the South African one. So Israel learned a lot of lessons from that, right? That's why it's a more cruel that's why it's a much more cruel version of the same apartheid regime that existed in South Africa. And beyond that, its resilience, Israel's resilience, is born out of the fact that they were there when the South African apartheid ended. They learned lessons from that, okay? They made themselves an undeniable part of American politics, for example. It's quite difficult to tackle this behemoth. And yet, I would go so far as to say, in such a short period of time, in over 3 years, there has been tremendous seismic shifts in this country. And the only reason why I can say that is because I've experienced it for the past 10 years leading up to the last 3. I've been an open anti-Zionist for the past 13 years of my professional media career, and much longer than that, obviously. But the seismic shifts in attitude that we have seen are relatively new. They are so new that many in positions of power do not even recognize it. They don't even understand where people are right now. Part of that is because they've lived a life. They've lived a lifetime of being pro-Israel, that Israel was the third rail, the untouchable point of contention that no one can ever bring up. If they do, then they're inundated with a barrage of attack ads and called an anti-Semite, and then that's it. No one questions it. So if you match up the seismic shift in attitude, where now, for the first time ever in American history, Americans are more in support of Palestinians than they are of Israelis. If you can't comprehend how that took place, then just learn go back in time and try to figure out exactly how this issue was communicated in broad daylight, in public discourse, even 3 years ago.
National strategy. And we don't have anybody putting things forward except Palestinian civil society. I mean, it's essentially in the hands of private individuals and private groups to do the work that a Palestinian liberation movement should be doing and hasn't really done for decades, which is to speak convincingly with a clear voice to global public opinion. The Zionists didn't take over and win simply because they had the support of great powers. Or it didn't simply win because they had more guns, and they didn't simply win because they had financial support. They won largely because they understood the importance of speaking to global publics. And unfortunately, Palestinian leaderships, benighted Palestinian leaderships from the 20s and the 30s right up through the current lot of people who should be turfed out, have never really understood the importance of it. I mean, what have you heard that a Palestinian ambassador has said? Well, there are 2 of them who've spoken that I've seen in the last several weeks. In London, and Salah Abdel Haider in Vienna, I think. So, I mean, I'm not blaming the individual diplomats. I'm blaming the fact that you do not have this unified national movement with a clear strategy and a clear voice speaking.
Where do you think it might come from now, this national movement?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to take refuge in the dodge that I always employ, which is the job description of a historian doesn't include predicting the future. I don't know where it should come from. I don't know where it would come from. These things are always unexpected. I don't think anybody expected the rise of the resistance in the late 1950s and early 1960s to come as it did, from where it did, in the way it did. I don't think I know nobody expected the first. My guess is people didn't expect the second. And so, I mean, I don't know where. As I said, I was speaking yesterday and the day before. I think that there's a reservoir of talent in the Palestinian diaspora. There's an enormous reservoir of talent in Palestinians inside it, of people who are savvy about what has to be said and the audiences that have to be addressed. I honestly don't think you can expect for this aspect of it. I'm not talking about a unified national movement. I'm talking about expression of a clear putting forward a clear strategy once we have one. I don't think you can expect people in Gaza or the West Bank whose only experience of the Israelis is brutal soldiers at checkpoints, or they're bombing you, or they're blowing up your house. I mean, how do those people speak to Israelis and Americans, people who've never been outside of Gaza, or people who can only travel with the greatest difficulty from the West Bank? It has to be either people inside Israel who have freedom to move and who know Israel better than anybody. Any Palestinians know Israel, and who have a sense of the Western world, or those Palestinians, the huge number of Palestinians in the Palestinian diaspora, especially in the West and Latin America.
They're very active.
This is a very cold and very calculated argument on propaganda, for the record. And I suspect that this will be very frustrating for a lot of people that hear this and go, how dare you say this? You know, how dare you say such a thing? This is, you know, you're disparaging. You're saying that the capabilities of Palestinians living in Gaza and the West Bank are worse or something. I don't know, but I don't think that's what he's saying. I think he's talking about who has the capacity, because of their lived experience, in generating propaganda, like communicating the plight of the Palestinians to people who don't think about the humanity of Palestinians at all. And no, when I say propaganda, I mean it as a neutral term. I'm not using the term Americans understand, which is like misinformation. That's not what I'm saying at all.
They are active. And in fact, if you look at where the greatest progress has been made and where the activism has been the most effective, it's actually those zones. It's not inside the Arab world, where the kind of repression that operates on Arab publics is operating even more severely on Palestinians who live in those countries. I mean, people tortured to death in Jordan for activism, Palestinian Jordanians.
Yeah, people have been arrested over the
People in Egypt are in jail for Egyptians for protest.
Even in Morocco, it's one of the biggest leaders of the BDS movement was found one day in his apartment in a coma, beaten, and the Moroccan authorities have not opened an investigation.
Nor will they. No. So I don't think you can count on people who live under that kind of repression, or who live physically under occupation in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, on this aspect of it, to take the lead. And that strategy, everybody has to be involved.
Yeah.
And as somebody said in the conference that the Institute for Palestine Studies had yesterday, the best way to engage this is democratically. I mean, you need to have elections. You need to have people putting forward a program for Palestine and seeing how people...
I also want people to understand that, like, it doesn't stop at a certain point. Like, you don't just, like, you don't stop at liberal Zionism, for example, right? If that's even what he's advocating for, which I don't think he is, right? Because he brings up, like, BDS and certain red lines that liberal Zionists immediately will say is, you know, anti-Semitic and shit like that. I think I have a fairly decent understanding of, you know, broader Western consciousness on this issue. And I am constantly and habitually and deliberately pushing the permission structure pushing the permission structure to the best of my ability, where I'm forgiving of people's shortcomings or moments of anger, of course, obviously. Like, I totally understand where it's coming from. But I also understand, like, what lines not to cross, okay? This is why Zionist groups get very frustrated with someone like myself when I choose my words very carefully and say things that most people would never be caught dead saying if they ever think that they can have a moment in you know, a moment of the spotlight of mainstream media, or a moment where they can talk about these sorts of issues convincingly in front of a charitable, large, liberal audience, and get them to question things that they had never questioned before. Okay? One example I use all the time is, of course, the Hamas is 1,000 times better than Israel. People despise that. Like, the pro-Israeli crowd hate that shit so much. What is this? I already watched it. I already watched the Purity Politics. Hey, I'm Dropsite social media editor who posted the Khalidi clips. Yeah. The Hamas is 1,000 times better than Israel conversation is one that really frustrates a lot of Zionists. And the reason why it frustrates a lot of Zionists is because, one, it's true, right? The truth frustrates Zionists, but it also frustrates Zionists because it causes the onlookers to agree with it because it's so unobjectionable. It's so clearly true that the average person who had never actually thought about it and assumes that Hamas is like this scary, dangerous alien force that is enforcing its wishes upon the Palestinian population aggressively due to all the propaganda about the Palestinian resistance that is only engaging in militancy out of anger and resentment and anti-Semitism due to all the Islamophobia, right? It causes people to immediately understand when they hear that for the first time ever. They go, wait a minute. Well, up until this very moment, I thought that these guys were violent barbarians who operate with one anti-Semitic goal in mind. It is true that objectively, Israel has done so many October 7s since October 7. And as long as you also go on this journey of understanding how Hamas was formed in the process, as long as you ask that question, wait a minute, he said that, I kind of agree with him. So what has Israel done before October 7 that might have led to October 7? All of a sudden, you have a bunch of liberals who previously had never questioned the narrative that Hamas, Hezbollah, and all forms of militancy against Israel and the United States of America in the region are just operating out of this weird, unadulterated hatred, right? The people that say loser supporter like this guy, those people start second guessing their priors, okay? Maybe not him, because I think he might be a supporter of the real terrorists in this conversation, the state of Israel. He might be confusing me with someone who supports the state of Israel. I do not. And for the record, as someone living in the United States of America, as a taxpayer in the United States of America, I have played a major role in the death and destruction and the demise of the Palestinians. Okay? So it's not up to me to sit around and consistently talk about my disagreements with Hamas's tactics or its form of internal governance, especially when the apartheid still remains, when the occupation still remains, and it worsens every day, especially as Israel is doing its job. I know my place, I find it ridiculous. You'd be like, well, but Hamas over and over and over again, as Israel gets to Palestinians en masse, as Israel gets to do the same now in Lebanon, as Israel tries to get America to do the same in Iran, right? It's ridiculous. What a ridiculous conversation. What purpose does this serve other than creating an environment of permission for Israeli action? That's it. I think it's no different than hyper-focusing your entire advocacy on the cruelty that the Nazis faced. It's no different than talking about the cruelty that the Nat Turner Rebellion created for slavers and their families. And I think we all understand, especially since the dust has settled on those two incidents, on those two systematic forms of cruelty, Germany and the Holocaust, and of course, chattel slavery, we immediately understand when someone hyper-focuses on that, when someone dials in on the violence that those who were enslaved subjected the slavers to. We say, why are you focusing on that? Don't you think that the far greater systematized form of violence in chattel slavery was a lot more consequential than what those who were previously enslaved subjected their slavers to? If you're to run around saying, well, what about the events like the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising that triggered a response by Nazis in retaliation, don't you feel like it was just? Everyone would understand you're talking to a Now, the problem is the contemporary example of Germany is Israel, and we're aligned with Israel. And not only are we aligned with Israel, but there is a fairly sophisticated and very pervasive propaganda arm of Israel that gets to operate in the United States of America. There's a fairly sophisticated influence peddling operation at the highest levels of office, including the presidency, that causes the American president commanding the most powerful legion, the most powerful military force on the planet, to be at the mercy, to follow along on the whims and the goals of Israeli leadership. That's it. That's why there are so many people who behave like this guy, product, right? Says the grift maxing Fuentes cosplayer, sit the f down, loser. Canada is cooked. There should have been a hard cap on abbreviations, to be honest. When you get to the point of just having sentence-long abbreviations for inclusion groups, I think the plot has been spectacularly lost. Ted Cruz. Here he is, the same guy that called me a supporter, calling into question Supreme Court of the United States, Ketanji Brown Jackson's qualifications for being a Supreme Court justice. Brother, the fact that you're asking Grok for approval implies that, you know, you will never understand why she absolutely deserves that role. Okay? It's hilarious. Lobotomy recipient. Many such cases.
Vote on it. Now, there are all kinds of problems with democracy. I'm not starry-eyed about, you know, the merits of democracy. On the other hand, the alternatives are all worse. A clique of people in Fatah or in Hamas will decide for the Palestinian people their future. No, I don't accept that. That's not acceptable. If they put their program to a democratic vote, and that vote leads to a unified position, fine. And we actually had that in 2006. There was a vote. Go back and look at what the Hamas program was. Was the Hamas program tahir min al-bahr al-nahr? No. It was to operate within the Oslo framework, to join parliament, to set up a government together with Fatah. That's what they went to the people with.
Right.
And that's what people voted for.
That's unacceptable for the Americans, for the Israelis.
I understand that. But then you have to maintain your unity and say this is the only basis on which we will deal.
I mean, I think people also have lost faith in what democracy can do when, like, the power of the veto, and when people here are on the streets every day and your politicians are just not listening to what the majority of the Democratic Party want, for example.
Change doesn't happen because we're very angry and we want it today. Change happens over years, sometimes decades, because of dedicated, long-term, sustained work. You did not stop the Vietnam War in 1 year or 3 years or 5 years. It took 10 years of work. You didn't stop the Iraq War. And those are easy compared to this one in terms of America. The second thing to say is, until they completely shut down the United States and create some kind of authoritarian regime, if that's the way we're going, we can do things here that people simply cannot do in Morocco or Jordan or Egypt. We still have freedom of speech. We still have freedom of organization. I mean, they may try and shut this down. I'm not saying it's inviolable, but it will no longer at that point be a democracy. We'll be in sort of Neverland of Hungary, which is nominally a democracy, but is not a democracy for, you know, for many purposes. My point is that democracy is terrible, a terrible system. But I hate to quote Winston Churchill, but it's the least bad of them all. And you do have the capability of doing things that you do not have in authoritarian regimes. So it will take a long time.
Incrementalism. I mean, incrementalism also serves a purpose. It's not the end all be all, but everyone plays a role is what I'm saying. Everyone plays a role. Every move you make to advance a certain goal is slowly but surely playing a role. Even when you convince like an immediate family member that they were wrong on this issue, right? Like that plays a role. They have the capacity to go and talk to others. Okay. This is important. It's important to understand. That's why I don't like cast aside anybody.